Wow, what a bittersweet time to be an Exodus player. Worlds 2020 has been postponed to 2021, and sadly that means Set 6 has been postponed with it. But with that being said, we have Magazine 4, and finally, our first glimpses of Set 6. This is Roland Wright, everyone. Let's break down some of the things that have been teased. Now, before I go too far, I'm going to space out the magazine reveals for Set 6 into multiple videos. If you want to see all of these amazing reveals right now, you're going to have to order a magazine yourself. It's only a couple of dollars, comes with one of 2 exclusive magazine promos, and you have a 10% chance of getting a hot pack included in your magazine that contains 4 of the most gorgeous alternate art promos in the game. Truly amazing looking things. Support Existence Games and this amazing game that they're delivering to us. Now then, without further ado, let's talk about Set 6. Or, should I say, Set 6 Threshold of Time. This set is a monumental step for Exodus the TCG. I don't even hesitate to say that Set 5 was the end of the first age of Exodus, and Set 6 heralds the second age. We've seen all of the previous guilds featured in the game slowly wind down as Set 5 drew their stories to a near conclusion. But now, new guilds rise up into Eventide's eternal conflict, and they introduce new ways to play. We're going to see multiple new mechanics, beautiful artwork that continues to take a step forward from each previous expansion, and most notably, 4 brand new guilds coming into the fray, each with their own creature types to focus on and mechanics to learn. In this video, I'm going to be covering the first guild that Magazine 4 introduces to us, the Archive. The Archive has probably the most unique and complex mechanic we've seen in Exodus so far. It's also one of the most exciting mechanics that drastically changes how a player builds their deck and plays the game. The Archive Guild uses a brand new card type, the first main deck card type we've seen since the game's official launch almost a decade ago. These cards are called Drifters, and if you've played many other different types of TCGs in modern times, you'll be slightly familiar with their initial concept. Drifters are your avatar. They are effectively you, and the damage they take is how you take damage. Your deck can only contain one non-creature drifter card, and it starts the game in play and can never leave play. In the magazine, we're teased with 2 of the drifter cards that we can expect to see coming in Set 6, and notably, they're both uncommon. But before I get into what abilities these drifters have, I need to further explain what this whole Drifter Archive mechanic does. Put simply, Archive decks are all about having your drifter card shapeshift into Archive creatures, a new creature type added in this set. When it comes to deck building, Archive creatures and the drifter card are exclusively their own deck. And what I mean by that is you can never have a non-archive creature, such as maybe an angel, in a deck with a drifter card. Technically, you can have an archive creature in a non-drifter deck, but they specifically have text on them that requires you have a drifter in play to even use them. So there's no reason to include them in non-drifter decks, meaning that ultimately, drifters and archive creatures are mutually exclusive to each other, and you won't see them in any other kind of deck. So, with all of that out of the way, what is the relationship between these archive creatures and your chosen drifter? Well, as I said before, the drifter is shape-shifting into these archive creatures. Every archive creature has the following bullet point text on the card. Quote, "This creature can only enter play on top of a drifter," end quote. What this means is that a drifter player will almost always be playing the game with only one creature in play, and that is the creature that's on top of their drifter card. The creature on top represents the current form that the drifter has shape-shifted into. While an archive creature is on top of the Drifter gains all of the archive creature's abilities in addition to the Drifter's original ability. And even more important than that is the fact that you can place archive creatures on top of your archive creatures, essentially forming a growing stack, all of which is considered to be on top of your Drifter. That allows your Drifter to build up multiple abilities as each archive creature in the stack contributes its ability to your singular creature. Now, all of that may be a little overwhelming to understand. There's also some rule semantics about how energy is handled and when you can actually take damage from attacks. These details can be found on this rule card and, of course, in the magazine. I'm sure we'll get more details and rulings as we get closer to the release of Set 6, but for now, this is pretty much the main concept behind Drifters and archive creatures. Alright, now we can actually dive into these archive creatures and Drifter abilities, and we're going to start with archive creatures. First up, we got Arachne, Conscript Crusader. This is a rare Drifter/archive creature with the ability DNA Encore. It reads, quote, "This creature can attack opposing creatures up to once each during your attack phase," end quote. For the most part, this card exists to make up for the fact that you're only going to have one super creature for the entire game. There's pros and cons to this approach. Essentially, anything that improves your attack will be amplified, such as a card like Siphon from Thoughts, but conversely, anything that hinders your attack will also be amplified, like being frozen. I'm unsure if you'll be able to declare an attack against a player after having used this ability to wipe out their board of creatures. To me, it seems like this is a passive ability that allows a free attack against each of your opponent's creatures, but we'll find out more later. Moving on to the next card, we have Yvonne, Chimerical Resonance. It's also a rare Drifter archive creature, but a good chunk of this card isn't visible. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume its ability name is called DNA Move. I tried taking a few guesses as to what its ability might be, but there's a few too many possibilities to make an accurate judgment to assess the card with. Considering that the card's ability name is likely DNA Move, I'm guessing that it has something to do with moving energy once per turn. Combine that with a Drifter that we're going to talk about later on, and that could be really strong. Hopefully we get more details later, but there's not much else I can really say here right now, so let's move on to the next one. Our last archive creature's name is Tula, Barricade of the Library. Now, this name is obscured in the magazine, however, in the Discord server we saw a picture of a yearbook ad in which this card's full name was revealed to us. It's also a rare Drifter archive creature, like the rest, and its ability is called DNA Halt. It reads, quote, "While this creature is in play, non-archive creatures cannot attack on the turn they are summoned." Wow! Needless to say, this card is pretty significant. This adds a summoning sickness element to the game that'll slow down players going against this deck. I would argue that this card may become a staple in every Drifter archive deck. Time will tell, but the ability to have a pseudo chains passively on every new creature in effect is pretty huge. There's no real counterplay to this, and it slightly punishes players using hand trick summons like Brigantine, Time Glypha, or Forerunner, since they'll get hit with this every time they are summoned. With all of the creatures out of the way though, we can now move to talk about Drifters. Our first Drifter shown is Archivist, and then half of its name is obscure. I suspect this could be Archivist Blacksmith, or it could be Archivist Cardsmith based off of other cards we've seen, like Carter the Cardsmith. This is an uncommon Drifter with the ability Forge. It reads, quote, "Once per turn, when your creature or symmetry cards become the target of opponent card effects or abilities, you may target one symmetry in your graveyard and play that card immediately. You must still pay any costs." End quote. Holy cow, this card is a huge deal. This card's ability is so strong for obvious reasons. Recursion in any game is huge, and this card has recursion on every single player turn so long as your opponent is targeting one of your cards, which is usually always. And remember, you have access to Drifter abilities for the entire game. The Drifter only leaves play when the game ends. You can have a constant supply of chains, crystal coves, leeches, unsummons, any of the new symmetries, etc. This is a super good card, but the main question is, what's the competition? You can only have one Drifter in your deck, so is it possible for the other Drifters to compete with this Drifter ability? And so the final Drifter we get to see is named Archivist Maven. It's also an uncommon, and it has the ability Drift. It reads, quote, once per turn, you may move one energy in play somewhere else on the same side of the field, end quote. So this ability is strong. Is it as strong as the Smith? I don't know. In essence, the Smith could trigger Symmetry cards from graveyard that do what Maven does, but better. For example, Leech or something like that. The downside is that Smith requires your cards be targeted by opponent effects or abilities. This means that you sacrifice having a wide variety of timing options with the Maven for having a wide variety of card options with the Smith. I think Maven is going to be really strong at sniping opponents' low energy creatures while also keeping itself fed with energy. And while we don't know what Yvonne's exact ability is, if it's also a once per turn move energy kind of ability, stacking the two of them together could be devastating. But just playing against this on its own can still be super tough, since you're going to have to constantly ensure you are keeping your own creatures healthy with energy. If they ever get down to one energy, the Maven can just snipe them out immediately. I think we're going to definitely see some builds that use Maven over Smith, and I can't wait to see what other Drifter options we have to choose from. Alright, to wrap up this video and the Archive Guild, we'll talk about the Symmetry support that's also been teased for this guild. The first Symmetry I want to talk about is pretty simple. It's a common Symmetry called Transmogrification. It reads, quote, summon an archive creature from your graveyard to your field, end quote. This is a very straightforward card. I'm not sure how powerful or consistently powerful it is, but I can certainly see it as a staple for these kinds of decks. The reason being is that I suspect each archive creature on your Drifter stack is super valuable to you, more so than any individual creature usually is to a normal player, because each ability stacks with your other archive creatures. Losing one of those abilities might make or break your offense or defense, and can cause you to topple over before your deck recycling and drawing that creature back. An example being Tula, for instance. Losing that card can be your primary defensive mechanic, and waiting until you draw it again is way too dangerous. This card is also strong in the sense that it doesn't send it to your hand, but instead automatically summons it, which means you can give yourself abilities during your opponent's turn, or another layer of archive creature during an opponent's attack or symmetry effect, like on summon. Naturally, this card goes really well with Archivist Smith, as it allows him to consistently keep archive creatures in play, even if they get nuked by the opposing symmetries. Now we move on to the final Archive Guild spoiler in the magazine. It's 3 separate symmetry cards that feature a new mechanic called Link. Essentially, these 3 symmetry cards can be played for their normal symmetry effect, but then they stay in play as part of a link, and once all 3 cards are in play at the same time, the link is complete, and you can fully read and resolve the link effect. I'm going to read to you the names of all 3 symmetry cards. Their basic effect is identical on all 3, and the link effect is only readable once all 3 are together. Therefore, I'll read it last. So first off, we have Eventide's Archive, we have the Great Archive, and we have Archive, the Hub of Knowledge. All 3 of these cards are uncommon, which is great. I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of these strong cards I've talked about, like the Drifters and now this, have all been uncommon, excluding the rare creatures, of course. All three of these cards also have a bullet point effect stating, quote, only one copy of this card is allowed in your main deck, end quote. And all three of these cards have the same basic effect that reads, quote, search your main deck or graveyard for one archive creature and add it to your hand. Then, shuffle your main deck if it was searched. After this card is played, it stays on the field until another card causes it to leave play, end quote. So this basic effect is pretty easy to understand. It's similar to Transmogrification. In some ways it's better, and in some ways it isn't. But now, let's talk about the link effect. The link effect, which only activates when you have all three of these cards in play under your control, reads, quote, when Eventide's Archive, the Great Archive, and Archive the Hub of Knowledge become linked, you may put all archive creatures from your graveyard into your hand. Your archive creatures may conduct an additional attack during your attack phase. Alright, so needless to say, I feel like these three cards will be a staple in nearly all archive decks. The ability to search out archive creatures from the main deck or recover them from grave is going to be super useful for this mechanic as a whole. Since archive creatures are about building a super creature with a lot of toolbox abilities, being able to consistently bring out the ones you need at any given moment of the game is huge. But then there's the other elements to this card. First off, if the card stays in play, it's shrinking your deck, therefore making it more consistent in the next deck recycle. Between the Drifter and each of these copies, that's 4 cards missing from your deck, meaning your deck is at least a size 16, if not lower. That's always a great plus. The link effect of these 3 cards is also pretty solid for 2 reasons. If it's late game and you've fallen behind, lost all your creatures, this lets you get one solid burst back into the game, rebuilding that creature stack that you lost. And for the second reason, similar to Rockne, this card allows you to better make up for the fact that you're only one creature, because it allows you to attack your opponent twice in a turn, or their creatures more than once per turn. This is essentially one of your possible win conditions. Overall, it's a really cool idea with gorgeous artwork, and the added bonus of it being an uncommon, so it's pretty much available to everybody. I think it's pretty well balanced, even if it is a staple. I don't feel like this card's link effect is that oppressive, and there's still some counterplay to it. And well, that's it for the Archive Guild. And wow, what a guild it is. I hope I was able to explain all this stuff fairly easily to you guys. Between the new mechanics, the card effects, and all of the potential in the game, as I said, I think this is one of the biggest waves that we've seen in Exodus, and I would be shocked if this guild doesn't become a big fan favorite in Season 4. Personally, I'm already super stoked to give this guild a try. As I said before, I'm going to be covering each guild in a separate video, so if you want to see the next guild covered, subscribe to the channel and you should see it up in a few days. Alternatively, don't forget to go to exoduscards.com and support the game by picking up a magazine. That's exodus-cards.com. There's tons of other cool stuff in it to check out, in addition to the set spoilers. Alright guys, until next time, this has been Roland Wright. Have a good one.